On Mount Olympus, a young deity paraded herself. She was the goddess of spring, and her youthful beauty enchanted the male deities. Her name was Cora, but she would become better known as Persephone. Demeter, her mother, was overprotective and shielded the young girl from the Olympic gods. She wanted her daughter to maintain her purity and virginity, as did the goddesses Athena, Artemis, and Hestia. So the goddess of agriculture kept Aphrodite and her son Eros away from her daughter. The divinities of love did not want to have another divinity in Olympus immune to their influence, and planned a way to attack the young goddess. Far from Olympus, in the depths of the earth, there was another god who lived free from the influence of the gods of love. His name was Hades, the lord of the underworld. The endless tasks of managing his kingdom allowed Hades to think of nothing else but his work. But a great tremor disturbed the kingdom of Hades, which rose to the surface to see what was happening. The Etna volcano was erupting, a sign that Typhon, the monster imprisoned by Zeus, was especially unhappy. That's when the god heard a sweet voice coming from a nearby forest. In the woods, Persephone sang without realizing that anyone was watching her. Aphrodite and Eros noticed Hades' interest in Persephone and wanted to take the opportunity. The god of passion and love fulminated the heart of the god with one of his golden arrows, which instilled desire and passion in the hearts of men and gods. Consumed by passion, Hades approached the spring goddess, who did not feel his approach. Hades tried to flirt with the young woman, but she resisted. Impetuously, Hades grabbed his beloved, and the earth opened so that he could return to his domain. With the goddess in his arms, the god of the dead descended through a tunnel into his kingdom. Persephone was very agitated and was locked in a room of Hades' palace until she became calmer. Hades declared his love for Persephone, who, although she felt attracted by the god, was still trying to push him away. Demeter started to get distressed because she didn't know where her daughter was, so she wandered the world in search of Persephone. After much searching, she found one of the nymphs who used to accompany her daughter. She told her how Hades kidnapped the girl, taking her to the underworld when the earth opened. Demeter was furious and would not forgive Gaia, the goddess of the earth, who had been an accomplice to her daughter's abduction when she opened up. As goddess of agriculture, Demeter was responsible for soil fertility. To punish Gaia, she decided to make the land infertile. The goddess cried because she missed her daughter, and, due to the great sadness she felt, she started to neglect her tasks. Zeus started to worry about the situation of the planet, because if Demeter didn't perform her tasks again, chaos would take over the world. The great god tried to convince Demeter to return to her tasks, but she said that the world would remain infertile until she had her daughter back. Zeus assured that Persephone would be freed from the underworld unless she had fed on some fruit from the underworld. At Zeus's request, Hermes guided Demeter to the underworld. After all, he was the conductor of souls, knowing the intricate ways that lead to the kingdom of Hades. The goddess met her daughter at the very moment she was eating pomegranate seeds offered by the lord of the underworld. After eating the fruit, Persephone metamorphosed and became the queen of the underworld. Demeter rebuked her daughter for agreeing to eat the food offered by such an evil being. Persephone said that her husband was not so bad. He treated her with respect and genuinely loved her. On top of everything else, there she would be a true queen. Demeter's heart felt an intense pain, and she started crying. Moved by his mother-in-law's sadness, Hades proposed a deal. Persephone would spend part of the year in the underworld, and the other part with his mother on the surface. Once the deal was sealed, Persephone returned to the surface with her mother. In the ground, which was infertile, many flowers sprouted. The harvests were chock full again. But the meeting period between Persephone and Demeter ran out, and the young goddess returned to the underworld to see her husband again. Demeter was desolate to see her daughter leave, and, depressed, she neglected her tasks again. But when mother and daughter met again, the world flourished once more, and so the seasons were born. Adonis was a beautiful young hunter. While wandering the woods in search of his prey, the young man was worshipped by the flower nymphs. His beauty was so striking that he looked like a god. One day, Adonis's beauty even drew Aphrodite's attention. The goddess of beauty and love, who was playing in the forest with her son Eros, sharpening his arrows. The goddess was delighted with the young man and began to praise him to her son. Eros grew angry due to jealousy and turned his back on his mother while continuing to sharpen his golden arrows. Aphrodite said that Eros should not be jealous, as to her, he would always be the most beautiful. She hugged him to comfort him, but accidentally ended up injuring herself on the arrow that Eros was holding. And so Aphrodite fell in love with Adonis. The goddess was spying the beautiful young man, and she could not resist his charms and succumbed to passion. Aphrodite asked the young man who he was, since his beauty was so wonderful that he resembled a god. Adonis knew that this lovely woman could only be Aphrodite, the goddess of love. He said that he was not a god, but a mere mortal. Aphrodite was intrigued, because she didn't know that a man could be almost as perfect as a god. Aphrodite drew closer with such a seductive look that no god, much less a mortal, could resist. The couple kissed and began to see each other regularly. These were days of passionate love. On a spring day, Persephone, the queen of the underworld, was wandering through the woods and stumbled upon the loving couple. She was delighted with what she saw. But she did not know that Eros, the god of love, was ready to pull another one of his pranks. He shot her with one of his arrows. The queen was now also in love with the boy, and decided that Aphrodite should enjoy it while she could, because one day the beautiful boy would be hers. Aphrodite was overzealous of Adonis, fearing that the young and daring hunter would injure himself on his hunts. But he kept telling her not to worry, because he was very experienced and promised not to take any chances. However, apart from Aphrodite and Persephone, there was one more god who was keeping an eye on the boy. His name was Ares, the god of war, who was Aphrodite's lover and therefore bore a great hatred for his rival. Ares knew that the young man's love for hunting rivaled his love for Aphrodite, and so plotted his revenge. Adonis roamed the woods in search of yet another prey when he stumbled upon a mighty boar. Ares stirred up the young man's bloodlust. He ended up forgetting the promise he made to the goddess of not risking himself needlessly. Adonis chose to fight the beast and managed to wound it. But Ares inflated the beast's heart with unbridled fury. The boar decided not to flee to preserve its life, but to furiously charge Adonis. He drove its powerful tusks into his abdomen. Adonis was mortally wounded. Aphrodite came running to his aid, but there was nothing more she could do. He died in her arms. She buried him, and upon his tomb grew beautiful red flowers that were named Adonis. As one goddess wept, another in the underworld was beaming and waiting for the arrival of the most beautiful man who ever lived. The powerless goddess of love watched the arrival of Hermes, who was there to lead Adonis's soul to Hades' realm. In the netherworld, Queen Persephone eagerly awaited the arrival of the most beautiful man in the world, for whom she cherished a great passion sparked by Eros's arrow. Adonis was welcomed in the underworld by specters, who treated him with great honors. The boy was surprised at such a reception. He had no idea of the love that the queen of the underworld had for him. Persephone's loyal specters lodged the boy in a special room in the royal palace. While Hades, the underworld lord, was asleep, his queen broke into her guest's chamber. The beautiful goddess cornered the young boy, but he tried to dodge her. He dreaded Hades' revenge, but the goddess told him not to worry. If he didn't tell the god, she wouldn't tell him either. With no way out, he gave in to the goddess's lust. The sneaky encounters continued day after day. Aphrodite longed for her lover and promptly decided to go down to the Hades realm and rescue her sweetheart. She found Adonis there serving the underworld gods and said she was there to bring her beloved Adonis back to the surface. Hades, however, was aggrieved to see the goddess of love invading his kingdom and making demands. Hades told her that he did not care for Aphrodite's will. He appreciated the services rendered by Adonis, and he would remain in the underworld forever. But Aphrodite threatened to extinguish all love from the face of the earth. Only bitterness and grudge would remain between the couples. Hades ousted Aphrodite from his kingdom. She left in tears, but her threats were not empty. Throughout the world, love between couples began to dwindle. The relationship between Zeus and the goddess Hera, usually strained, was becoming unbearable. Zeus decided that something had to be done. He called for a meeting with Hades, Persephone, and Aphrodite, saying that the whole situation couldn't go on. He suggested Hades take possession of Adonis, just like the agreement he had made with the goddess Demeter. For a third of the year, he would stay in the underworld. The next third he would spend on the surface with Aphrodite, and the young man would have a third to enjoy in any way he wished. Hades took issue with Zeus's intrusion into matters of his kingdom, but knowing that Adonis was Persephone's favorite servant, he said he would not accept such an offer. To Hades' surprise, however, Persephone replied that, if it was for the good of all, she would allow Adonis to resurface and return to her husband's kingdom only when winter was approaching. Baffled, Hades did not understand why Persephone would release Adonis without putting up a fight. Spring arrived and Adonis departed to meet his lover Aphrodite. But summer meant that the goddess had to leave him. Hades had not anticipated summer is also the time that Persephone comes out of the underworld to find her mother, the goddess Demeter. And during the summer, Adonis and Persephone loved each other without bothering about being caught by the underworld king. But the quarrel between Persephone and Aphrodite remained. They always sought to maximize the length of their relationship with Adonis. This is why in some years the winter seems longer or the heat of summer persists. The love story of Hades and Persephone is one of Greek mythology's most famous. You have certainly heard the story that the god kidnapped her, which gave rise to the seasons. But before he met Persephone, Hades had a lover named Minthe, a nymph who lived by the river Cocytus. However, when Hades fell madly in love with Persephone, Minthe was cast aside. Some say that when Persephone headed to the surface to spend the spring and summer with her mother, the nymph Minthe would not leave the ruler of the underworld alone. But when Persephone returned, Hades would run straight into her arms, leaving the greenish nymph abandoned. Minthe went on to brag that she was the most beautiful entity in the underworld, as even Hades could not resist her charms. These claims made Persephone furious. The queen of the underworld would not let such an insult to her honor go unpunished. Persephone turned the nymph into a plant known as mint. Mint was a plant used in funerals in ancient Greece. One of the reasons was that the aroma masked the odor of the deceased. Therefore, the plant personified by the nymph Minthe became forever bound to her lover's domains. Have you ever heard the story of Zeus's successor? Like so many of the bastard sons of the great Olympian god, he was ruthlessly persecuted by Hera and suffered a tragic fate. Today, you will learn the story of Zagreus and his remarkable tale filled with twists and turns. Known for his numerous love affairs, Zeus turned his lust on the goddess Persephone, daughter of his sister Demeter, the goddess of the harvest and fertility. Having been kidnapped by the underworld ruler Hades, Persephone became his queen. But that would not deter Zeus. To outsmart Hades, he changed into a serpent and mated with Persephone. Zagreus was conceived from this sneaky divine bond. He was born with a great destiny, bound for mighty deeds from the moment he took his first breath. Having spotted Zagreus as a worthy heir, Zeus intended to bring him to Olympus and make him his successor. After his birth, Zagreus was entrusted to the care of the Curetes and the nymphs, divine figureheads who had a key role in protecting and educating the young gods. The Curetes were mythological warriors who danced and pounded their weapons to produce loud noises, protecting the child from Hera's jealous eyes, which harbored a deep resentment toward Zeus's illegitimate children. This sound protection from the Curetes prevented the baby's cries from reaching Hera on Olympus, making it essential to keep Zagreus safe from any threats. For their part, the nymphs played a crucial role in Zagreus's upbringing. They were known for their abilities in different arts and natural knowledge. Zagreus was raised in an educational environment where he learned about nature, music, and dance, as well as being instructed in life and death mysteries. The goddess Athena was a particularly important figure in his upbringing. She was particularly interested in Zagreus and often visited the place where he was being raised. Athena, being the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, imparted to Zagreus a profound understanding of strategy, leadership, and the divine mysteries. Although surrounded by love and protection, Zagreus was not completely immune to the machinations of Olympus. His childhood was a time of intense training and protection. He grew up not just as a young god, but as an entity meant for great deeds and challenges. Once Zagreus had reached maturity, Zeus, acknowledging his son's strength and potential, intended to prepare him to take the throne and rule over gods and mortals. This revealed Zeus's trust in his abilities, but it also marked a meaningful change in the Olympian balance of power. But Zeus's decision triggered the envy and fury of Hera, his wife and queen of the gods, known for her jealousy and vindictiveness against Zeus's lovers and illegitimate children. The goddess could not accept the idea that a son of Zeus with another woman, particularly Persephone, could be the next ruler. Hera considered this a threat to her own power and that of her legitimate children. She was also deeply concerned about the potential alliances that Zagreus could form, considering that he had been born from the relationship between Zeus and Persephone, connecting heaven and the underworld. Intent on having his plan fulfilled, Zeus entrusted Zagreus with the thunderbolt, the symbol of his ultimate power, stating his clear desire to make him the next ruler. This ceremonial act designated Zagreus as the chosen one, an honor that came with lofty expectations and responsibilities. Deciding to prevent Zagreus from taking the throne, Hera plotted to destroy the threat he posed. The goddess urged the Titans, ancient deities known for their strength and malice, to attack Zagreus. By offering them power and benefits, Hera managed to persuade them to implement her evil plan. While Zeus dreamt of a bright future for his son, Hera engineered his annihilation. Disguised in white plaster, so as not to be recognized, the Titans used glowing objects to lure Zagreus. The curious and innocent young god approached them, unaware of the impending danger. When they finally succeeded in drawing him away from his guardians, the Titans savagely attacked him. They viciously dismembered Zagreus, slicing his body to pieces while he was still alive. This dismembering was more than mere physical violence. It had a deep symbolic meaning. In Greek mythology, dismemberment stood for the destruction and fragmentation of divine unity, a profanity-laced act against the order established by the Olympian gods. Following the dismemberment, the Titans devoured Zagreus's fragments, assimilating his divine power into themselves. With this ritualistic cannibalism, the Titans attempted to encroach on Zeus's power by destroying his chosen successor. Yet this defilement did not go undetected. The goddess Athena saved Zagreus's heart before the Titans could devour it. She took it to Zeus, who, profoundly shocked and angered by the Titans' betrayal, exacted his almighty revenge. He destroyed them with his thunderbolts, reducing them to cinders. Zagreus's heart was used by Zeus to usher in the young god's rebirth. With this, Zagreus would rise again as Dionysus, bearing with him the promise of renewal and the continuity of divine life. Zagreus was therefore reborn under a new identity. Dionysus inherited Zagreus's divine nature and his magnificent destiny, but now he also bore traits of life and death, joy and madness, wine and feasts. As Dionysus, he became the god of wine, fertility, ecstasy, and theater, carrying with him the promise of renewal and transformation. Zagreus Dionysus came to be worshipped all over ancient Greece, with a particularly strong cult among the Orphic, a religious group that revered death and rebirth as part of an eternal cycle. The Zagreus Dionysus myth was central to the Orphic religion, which stressed spiritual purification and the soul's immortality. Dionysus's followers held celebrations in his honor, such as the Dionysian festivals, with processions, dances, music, and theater. These celebrations expressed Dionysus's dual nature, joy and ecstasy, but also madness and chaos. Orphic customs included initiation rituals that symbolized death and rebirth, echoing Zagreus Dionysus's own experience. Zagreus Dionysus's legacy also spread to Greek philosophy and literature. This myth influenced philosophers such as Plato and poets like Euripides, who further explored the topics of transformation, rebirth, and the redeeming power of suffering. This narrative may have given you unexpectedly different information from what you usually find in other myths. This is because the Orphic myths are significantly different from the Greek ones told by Hesiod and other classical sources. Whereas Hesiod and like-minded poets focus on narratives that place emphasis on the hierarchical nature of the gods and divine genealogies, Orphic myths have a more mystical and esoteric approach, focusing on spiritual purification and the immortality of the soul. Orphic traditions feature death and rebirth themes, typified by the figure of Zagreus Dionysus, and encourage initiation rituals and a cyclical view of life, death, and rebirth. By contrast, Hesiod's works, such as the Theogony, depict a more linear and hierarchical cosmos, where order is established through conflicts between generations of gods. While Hesiod's mythology is focused on the origins and order of the physical universe, the Orphic myths explore the spiritual and transcendental aspects of existence. For this reason, Zagreus Dionysus has a significant role within Orphism, and his myth is still so relevant today. The Isthmian Games were celebrated in the city of Corinth. They were a kind of Olympic Games in honor of Poseidon. The contestants would compete in different events, but the chariot race was the most prestigious. The best drivers took part in the sport. Among them was Phaethon, son of the Titan Helios, with the nymph Clymene. In case of victory in the chariot competition, the sun god promised his son to grant him anything he desired. Motivated by his father's promise, Phaethon won the hotly contested chariot race. After his victory, he boasted and said that he was such a good chariot driver that he could even drive his father's sun chariot. Helios was the god responsible for driving the sun chariot, guiding it from dawn to dusk. One of Phaethon's colleagues laughed in his face and said that only Helios could drive the sun chariot. Even his son could not achieve such a feat. Phaethon was furious at the remarks and decided to head to the far east, where the palace of the god Apollo was located. Upon arriving at his father's abode, he went to Helios's throne and told him that he already knew what he wanted as a prize for having won the race. More than anything else, he wanted to drive the sun chariot. Helios was startled by such a request, but there was nothing he could do, for the promise had been made. The goddess Aurora announced the arrival of a new day, and Phaethon was in his father's chariot, with the horses prancing and neighing. Helios advised his son to hold tightly to the reins without ever flinching, as the horses were wild and obeyed only those with a firm hand. Aurora ran ahead of the animals with her torch, and Helios's horses shot after her. Phaethon had trouble restraining them at the start. The task was more difficult than he imagined. During the great climb, Phaethon made a huge effort and used all his skill as a chariot driver to guide the horses properly. By midday, Phaethon had withstood the demanding test of the climb. He was now at the most relaxed part of the journey. The son of Helios felt like a true god contemplating the world from above, and because he was ecstatic, he eased off the reins. Feeling loose, the horses plunged toward the ground. Phaethon couldn't control them, and they were about to crash catastrophically into the earth. When the collision was near, the young man prevented the sun from colliding with the earth. But still, he was flying dangerously low. Everything below was scorched by the sun. Lakes and rivers evaporated, and the sea boiled over where he passed. Noticing that the sea was boiling, Poseidon went to Olympus to demand that Zeus act. Fearing even greater damage, the supreme god decided to strike Phaethon with one of his thunderbolts. The young man didn't even realize what had hit him, and fell from the sun chariot. Phaethon tumbled out of the sky like a shooting star. His dead body fell into the river Eridanus. The frightened horses returned to Helios's palace. Phaethon's remains were collected by the naiad nymphs and buried. Over his tomb, a monument was erected to the audacity of the young man who dared to drive the sun chariot. The journey of Apollo's son left scars on the earth. The region scorched by the sun became infertile and waterless. Today, this region is known as the Sahara Desert. The goddess Hera was looking for her husband Zeus, but she could not find him anywhere on Olympus. She was sure that he was hiding with another one of his mistresses. At the top of Olympus, the goddess saw a black cloud covering the river Inachos, and she strongly believed that her husband was hiding there. Zeus had come down to earth to meet again with his mistress, the princess Io. The young woman noticed that the goddess Hera was approaching and warned Zeus. He, in an impromptu move, decided to turn the girl into a beautiful cow. Pretending not to understand her husband's trick, the goddess asked what he was doing next to the cow, hinting that Zeus's appetites were getting increasingly bizarre. He awkwardly said that he was just admiring the magnificent animal. Hera agreed that that was a very beautiful cow, and so she would want it for herself. Zeus ran out of options and let Hera take the poor cow to Olympus. Upon arriving at Olympus, the goddess called her lackey Argus, a creature with 100 eyes. She told him to take the animal to a distant place and to watch over it constantly. The monster took the beautiful cow to Egypt, hidden from everyone. He released the animal there, keeping it under constant surveillance. Even when resting, Argus kept some of his eyes open, watching the cow-shaped nymph. After learning of Io's disappearance, Zeus asked Hermes to find and kill the creature that had taken her. Hermes scoured all the pastures, fields, and even swamps, searching for Zeus's missing little cow. Finally, the light god found Argus watching the nymph as she grazed. The god decided to disguise himself as a sheepherder and sneak up on the two. Hermes was playing the flute, and the melody pleased the creature. Argus asked the shepherd to come closer, for he had loved the music. The god played the instrument, and noticed that the monster was increasingly relaxed. His eyes began to close, but many were still open. Hera's lackey asked what the story of the instrument was. The clever Hermes decided to tell the story of how the god Pan invented the syrinx flute and narrated it as if it were a bedtime story. When the creature closed his last eye, Hermes jabbed him with his caduceus, which had the power to put anyone struck into a deep sleep. The god took his sword and decapitated the monster. The nymph was free, but still had the form of a cow. Hera, upon learning of the death of her faithful servant, decided to honor him. She placed each of his eyes on the feathers of her royal peacock, and she decided that the nymph would not get away with it. So she ordered the Furies, the entities of revenge, to torment her constantly. From that day on, the poor cow was pursued by a cloud of flies, which would not leave her alone. Tired of the harassment of the flies, the cow collapsed, and with her mooing, she begged the gods to put an end to her suffering. Standing before Hera, Zeus said that if the goddess withdrew her punishment of Io, he would never look for the princess again. Hera lifted the punishment imposed on the young princess, and Zeus reinstated her old form. The only remaining trace that resembled the little cow was her white skin tone. The Egyptian people, seeing the transformation, began to worship the young girl as a divine figure. The princess got pregnant by Zeus and gave birth to Epiphus. Both reigned in Egypt for many years. Io came to be revered as the goddess Isis, and her son Epiphus as the god Apis, founder of the great city of Memphis. In the kingdom of Phoenicia, King Agenor ordered his son Cadmus to find the whereabouts of his daughter Europa, who had been kidnapped by Zeus. The latter, shaped as a bull, had kidnapped her. The king stated that Cadmus could only return home if he brought his sister with him. Cadmus and his men went around the world, looking for clues to his sister's whereabouts, but found nothing. He went to Greece and sought help from the Oracle of Delphi. The priestess said that his fate was not to return to his father's kingdom with his sister, but to found one of the most famous cities in Greek mythology. Following the priestess's directions, Cadmus went after a cow, and, where the animal would lie down, he would found a new city. The cow laid down, and Cadmus said that there the glorious city of Thebes would be established. Cadmus ordered the men to go to a spring near a cave to fetch water for the new settlement, but there was a terrible beast inside the cave that attacked and killed Cadmus's envoys. After long waiting for his men to return, Cadmus put on his lion-skin cloak and went in search of them. Cadmus was horrified by the gruesome scene he saw. A terrifying dragon had annihilated and torn his men apart. Although he had never encountered such a creature, Cadmus was not afraid and faced the beast to avenge his comrades. Cadmus was almost devoured by the beast when the dragon drove its fangs into the hero's lion cloak. He reacted and drove a spear into the beast's belly, which howled in pain. Cadmus dodged a deadly poisonous blast from the beast. As the creature caught its breath to release another venomous spurt, Cadmus threw another spear at the beast. Cadmus's spear entered the monster's mouth and pinned the creature's head to the trunk of a tree. The dragon died, and Cadmus avenged his compatriots. Despite the victory, Cadmus lost all his men to the monster. He was desolate. Athena came up behind him and told him to pull out the dragon's teeth and plant them in the ground. Armed men sprang up in the places where the dragon's teeth had been planted. To Cadmus's surprise, these warriors began to fight fiercely among themselves, and a great brotherly bloodbath ensued. Only the 5 best warriors remained, who knelt before Cadmus, their new king, helping him to build the new city. The gods graced Cadmus. He was offered the hand of the goddess Harmonia, daughter of Ares and Aphrodite. Cadmus and Harmonia gave birth to the legendary Theban royal house, and their descendants made their mark on Greek mythology. Aphrodite was known for having many lovers. One of them was Hermes, a messenger god. From this union would be born a child named Hermaphroditus, after both parents. The child was raised by the nymphs at the foot of Mount Ida. From an early age, the child displayed the divine beauty inherited from his parents. When he was no longer a child, he left Mount Ida to discover the world. Wherever he passed, he drew attention given his physical beauty. After one of his hunts, he stooped down to cool off in the waters of a pond. And suddenly, Salmacis, the naiad nymph, appeared, delighted by the young man's beauty and yearning to join him. Hermaphroditus rejected the nymph, but Salmacis would not give up easily. The young man went into the waters of the pond to cool off, not realizing that the nymph was still on the prowl. Hermaphroditus was taken by surprise when the aquatic nymph jumped on him. The young man could not escape from Salmacis, for water was the natural element of the naiad nymphs. The nymph asked the gods that she and the young man become one, becoming united forever. The gods accepted her request, and the bodies of Salmacis and Hermaphroditus started to join together. The nymph and the young man now shared the same body, blending male and female features. This new intersex being was misunderstood by other people. For this reason, Hermaphroditus was viewed with suspicion and felt great shame.
Tithonus was a handsome Trojan prince, brother of King Priam of Troy. By chance, he met the beautiful goddess of the dawn, Aurora. The goddess and the young human immediately fell in love. But Aurora was worried that Tithonus was a mortal, preventing them from living together forever. She then asked Zeus to make him immortal. Aurora got her wish, but forgot to ask for the gift of eternal youth. So Tithonus continued to age. Tithonus could only speak like a baby when he was 150 years old. Many centuries passed, and Aurora locked her husband in a room. Tithonus was still alive, but all that remained of him was a dried-up husk of the man he used to be. The blessing of living forever had turned into a curse.
Tyndareus reigned over Sparta and was indebted for his crown to Hercules, who had killed his brother when he had attempted to seize the Spartan throne. The Spartan king then went on to marry a beautiful princess named Leda. She was so gorgeous that she attracted Zeus's interest, and he began to lust for the young queen. Leda was cooling off one day on the shore of a stream as she watched a beautiful swan ballet across the water. The girl was delighted with the creature's loveliness. Suddenly, an eagle plunged its pointed talons into the swan. The beautiful bird evaded the assault, swiftly moving closer to the young queen, who protected him. Leda enjoyed touching the bird's soft feathers and plumes, but the naive princess had no idea that this handsome swan was actually Zeus transformed into a fowl. The great swan-shaped god bonded with the young queen and sowed his divine seed into her. After the bird left, Leda was still overcome with desire and sought out Tyndareus, her husband, with whom she had a night of passionate love. The queen became pregnant, and, to everyone's surprise, she laid 2 eggs. Helen and Pollux, Zeus's children, were born from one of them, and Castor and Clytemnestra, Tyndareus's children, were born from the other. The king made no distinction between the babies and brought them all up as his legitimate children. His offspring would leave their mark on Greek mythology. Clytemnestra would then marry Agamemnon, the greatest of all the Greek kings. Castor and Pollux would become part of Jason's crew that would set out on the adventure in search of the Golden Fleece. Meanwhile, Helen would become the world's most beautiful woman and would be sought after by almost all the Greek kings, and her kidnapping would be the trigger for the start of the Trojan War.
Hephaestus, god of forges, had berated his wife Aphrodite after catching her red-handed having an extramarital affair with Ares, the god of war. The god took a long time to recover from such a humiliation. To alleviate his pain, he began to focus exclusively on work. At this time, the Trojan War had broken out, and Athena, goddess of strategic warfare, went to Hephaestus's forge with an order for new weapons and armor. Hephaestus was a magnificent blacksmith, and Athena enjoyed visiting his workshop to watch the making of the weapons that were true works of art. The god of the forges enjoyed the visits of the beautiful and haughty goddess of wisdom, who illuminated Hephaestus's forge with her splendor and lessened the loneliness of the blacksmith deity. Poseidon, god of the seas and Athena's rival, seeing the friendship between the gods, decided to stir up an argument between them. The sea god poked Hephaestus, saying that Athena had an interest in a love affair with the god of the forges. But Athena had no intention of having an affair with anyone, for she had taken a vow of chastity and wished to remain pure for all eternity. Upon hearing this false account, Hephaestus was thrilled. After all, one of the most beautiful goddesses of Olympus wanted to be with him. When the goddess decided to pay another visit, Hephaestus, consumed by lust, tried to seduce her, but Athena rejected him. However, the god was beset by desire and tried to conquer her through force. The god grabbed the virgin goddess, but the deity of war pushed him away. However, Hephaestus had already poured out his divine seed. The goddess disgustingly shoved the god of forges back, throwing him to the ground. Hephaestus's divine seed fell to the earth and was taken up by Gaia, who subsequently gave birth to the fruit of this mishap. The baby's name was Erichthonius, a strange creature with the trunk of a man and the tail of a serpent. Athena adopted Erichthonius as her own son, but the baby was not yet ready to live in the mortal world. So, Athena put him in a basket and gave the child to the princess of Athens, a city consecrated to the goddess after her feud with Poseidon. The goddess told them that they could never peek into the contents of the box, but the princess's curiosity was greater than their caution. They opened the box and found the creature. They became mad and threw themselves from the top of Athens' Acropolis. Athens returned for her son and raised him in the temple dedicated to the goddess. Under the guardianship of the deity of wisdom, Erichthonius became a wise and diligent adult. He was one of the legendary kings of Athens, with a prosperous regency. During his reign, the Greeks learned how to deal with money. Accordingly, the son of Athena went down in history as one of the best rulers of Attica.
After returning from a trip to India, Dionysus wandered around the world, teaching men to cultivate vines that had the sweet grapes as their fruit. These were used to produce wine, a drink considered almost divine because of its connection to this god. But while the young god was strolling along the seashore, he was spotted by a band of pirates. When they saw the handsome young man in a purple robe, they had no doubt that he was the son of a king or a wealthy nobleman. The pirates surrounded Dionysus, who offered no resistance, and forced him into the pirate ship. The captain ordered the god to be tied to the main mast, where he was to remain until a large ransom was paid by his family. But to the pirates' surprise, even the most complex and intricate knots untied themselves. The captain ordered Dionysus to sit quietly by the mast under the watch of his men. The old helmsman warned the captain that the slack knots was a divine sign that the young man should be freed, but the captain ignored him. Dionysus had enough and decided to act. The wind ceased, and the sails of the boat became useless. When the sailors put their oars in the water, they turned into thick vines. And miraculously, it began to rain wine to the sailors' astonishment. When the pirates looked at Dionysus, his eyes glowed like fire. Vines spread throughout the ship from the god's body. The god summoned on board a leopard, which let out a terrible roar, terrifying the pirates. In panic, the sailors jumped into the sea. When they touched the waters, they suffered a metamorphosis and turned into dolphins. Dionysus spared the old helmsman, for he proved to be God-fearing. This is the story of how the god of wine transformed a band of pirates into a new species of dolphin. Clytie was a beautiful nymph in love with Helios, the sun god. They had a relationship, But the sun god saw nothing special in the nymph and abandoned her. Even after being rejected, Clytie spent her days contemplating her sweetheart as he crossed the skies during the day. She did nothing else and began to wither away after so many days of just following the motion of the sun. The forsaken nymph eventually passed away, but the gods did not allow her, out of love for the sun, to be forgotten. In her final resting place, beautiful yellow flowers appeared. Just like the nymph Clytie, they were always turned towards the sun while the god was crossing over it. This flower became known as the sunflower. Hyacinth was a young man of great beauty. His beauty was so immense that he even attracted two deities. One of them was Apollo, the god of music and prophecies. The other was Zephyrus, also known as the West Wind. Hyacinth was amused by Zephyrus. He flied across the sky alongside the god, piercing the clouds. With Apollo, the youngster rejoiced with the songs played by the brilliant god. The boy and the god became quite intimate. Hyacinth spent his days beside the god of music, doing all sorts of things. Realizing that he had been left out, Zephyrus started to nurture a great grief in his heart. One day, Apollo and Hyacinth decided to throw the discus. After preparing himself to throw it, Apollo launched the disc with incredible strength. The disc reached a stunning height. Hyacinth was ready to catch it, which descended at high speed. But the jealous Zephyrus blew the disc away, suddenly changing its trajectory. The disc fell to the ground, and after the rebound, hit Hyacinth's head with violence. Apollo ran to rescue the boy, whom he treasured so much. The god tried to use his powers to save Hyacinth's life, but not even the mighty Apollo could change Hyacinth's fate, traced by the Moirai. The beautiful boy died in Apollo's arms. Beautiful flowers started to sprout where Hyacinth's blood drops fell. Apollo felt guilty for ending Hyacinth's life at the peak of his youth, and in tribute to his friend, the god wrote his most beautiful songs, which were also the saddest and most melancholic. But with the arrival of spring, the god rejoiced, because the beautiful flowers born of the young's blood reappeared, and these came to be known by the name of Hyacinth. Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, was a deity of great beauty and elegance. Her charm was so strong that she attracted Poseidon, the god of the seas. The goddess rejected the attempts of the sea god, who seemed determined to conquer her. To escape from Poseidon, the goddess took the form of a mare, but the god was the lord of horses and transformed himself into a stallion to pursue the goddess of fertility. Demeter was caught and taken by force. From this unwanted union, two offspring were born: the divine winged horse Arion and little Despina. Disgusted at having been raped, Demeter repudiated the child and left to purify herself in the river Ladon, where all sorrows could be forgotten. Poor Despina grew up without her mother's love, and the young goddess's heart was filled with great resentment. Unlike Despina, Persephone, Demeter's daughter with Zeus, was loved and spoiled by her mother. This saddened the neglected daughter enormously. When Persephone left to meet Hades in the underworld, Demeter was always saddened and neglected her duties as goddess of agriculture. Despina would take advantage of this moment to destroy her mother's work. She generated frost that ruined the crops, and during the winter, the snow made the fields barren. She also froze rivers, lakes, and inlets to punish her father. Even though she had an icy heart, she found a loving partner in Boreas, a deity who represents the icy north wind. When Persephone, the goddess of spring, returned after a period in the underworld, she saw that the flowers, which she had cultivated with so much love, had been destroyed. And this is how she learned of the existence of Despina, her sister. Persephone and Despina met, and despite being goddesses of opposite natures, there was no room for disagreement between the sisters. They became friends, even with opposite tasks. Despina, the goddess of winter, was traveling the world taken by her husband Boreas. He, with his icy wind, announced the arrival of the new season. Hebe, the goddess of youth, was the daughter of Zeus and Hera. She was also a deity connected with housework. One of her jobs was to be a cupbearer at the banquets on Mount Olympus. Hebe served the nectar of immortality to the gods. In a stroke of fate, one day Hebe stumbled and dropped all the sacred nectar. The other gods could not contain their laughter. But Zeus didn't like this at all, and decided to dismiss the goddess of youth from her role of serving the gods. Hera did not like Hebe being demoted from the nectar and ambrosia distribution. She warned Zeus not to choose one of his mistresses for Hebe's place. Zeus assured the goddess that no woman would take the place of the goddess of youth. Out of ideas, Zeus began watching the men, looking for someone capable of filling the open spot. Suddenly, he saw Ganymede, Prince of Troy, who was helping to shepherd the royal flocks. Ganymede had an almost divine beauty. Perhaps there had never been a mortal as beautiful as he was. Zeus decided that someone with such beauty was not meant to live among men. The presence of that gem would further enrich the abode of the gods. The supreme god took the form of an eagle and descended to earth to abduct the beautiful Ganymede. The eagle surreptitiously flew over the young man. After descending toward him, the great bird grabbed Ganymede by surprise. The beautiful young man was gently carried by the divine bird toward Mount Olympus. Ganymede stood before the gods of Olympus. They were impressed by the beauty of the mere mortal. Zeus presented him as a substitute for Hebe in the celestial banqueting duties. Ganymede had the prestigious responsibility of serving nectar and ambrosia to the gods. The young man was also given the gift of immortality, retaining his youthful beauty forever. Ganymede was highly regarded by the gods, who valued the excellent service provided by the young man. Only the goddess Hera was not particularly fond of the cupbearer. She was jealous of the long periods that Zeus spent with the handsome young man. But Zeus's wife was not the only disgruntled person. The king and queen of Troy were extremely saddened by their son's disappearance. To lessen the pain of Ganymede's parents, Zeus created the constellation Aquarius, represented by the figure of young Ganymede. As they looked up into the sky, the parents knew that their son was in an honored place beside the gods of Olympus.
Kairos is a time-related Greek deity, as opposed to Cronus, who is considered the god of time. Kairos is considered the deity of opportune time, or the right moment. This is why he is also considered the god of opportunity. The Greeks used to believe that everything had its right time to happen, but major opportunities happen only a few times in life, and they can pass very quickly. Kairos had a long top knot, while the rest of his head was hairless. For this reason, the ancient Greeks believed that, when the god came along with a great opportunity, one ought to seize it immediately. If you let the opportunity pass by, you cannot grab it, and the great opening will be lost forever.
Atalanta is a heroine from Greek mythology, but when she was little, her father wanted to have only male children, and she was abandoned in a forest. The little girl was left at the mercy of the beasts, in a fate that seemed terrible. But surprisingly, she ended up taken in and raised by a bear, along with 2 cubs. When she was still a child, she was found by hunters, who decided to raise her from then on. From a young age, Atalanta showed an innate talent for hunting. She joined the hunting pack that followed the goddess Artemis. Atalanta's father, regretting having acted incorrectly against his only daughter, asked her for forgiveness. The young girl went on to attend her father's court. Her father, Sconius, king of Cadmes, was very proud of his daughter. She was known to be faster than a roe deer. Atalanta became even more famous after attending the Caledonian boar hunt. This ended tragically with Meleager's death. After this event, Atalanta was given a prophecy. If she were to marry, her life would go into ruin. But Atalanta was beautiful and the daughter of a king. She had hundreds of suitors. Her father, fearing his daughter's fate, prepared a plan to protect her. Whoever beat Atalanta in a race could marry his daughter. But if the suitor lost, he would have to pay for his defeat with his life. Despite the heavy penalty in case of defeat, many put their lives on the line to marry Atalanta, but they all died. After the demise of so many suitors, the king believed that his daughter was safe. But there was still a young man named Hippomenes. He was known for running very fast. Atalanta had met him already and knew that he could run at a faster speed than she could. But she also knew that he was unable to maintain that speed for very long. The young Hippomenes was in love with the beautiful Atalanta. At the temple of the goddess of love, he asked Aphrodite for help to seduce the young woman. The goddess appeared with golden apples and gave him instructions to follow during the race. It was time for the contest. The couple prepared for the start. Hippomenes took the lead, but Atalanta was not worried. She knew that the young man would not be able to keep up the pace for long. Hippomenes began to lose speed, and Atalanta was about to overtake him. At this moment, Hippomenes took out of his bag a golden apple, which caught the girl's attention. He dropped one of the apples on the ground. Atalanta, impressed by such a precious thing, bent down to pick it up. The young man managed to distance himself, but after picking up the apple, Atalanta ran even faster. The finish line was near, but Atalanta drew closer to Hippomenes, quick as an arrow. Just as Hippomenes was about to be overtaken, he dropped another apple. Atalanta could not resist the urge and bent down to pick up the fruit. Hippomenes crossed the finish line first. Fulfilling his promise, the king gave his daughter's hand to Hippomenes. Hippomenes and Atalanta got married. But, contrary to the prophecy, everything seemed to go well. However, the couple forgot to thank the goddess Aphrodite for allowing that union, and the deity did not like ungrateful people. The goddess decided to punish them and fostered lust in the couple. Unable to control their instincts, they had sex inside the temple dedicated to Rhea, mother of Zeus. Furious at such a lack of respect, Rhea, the powerful Titan, turned the beautiful couple into lions. As punishment, Atalanta and Hippomenes were destined to pull the glorious chariot of Rhea, the glorious mother of the Olympian gods.